I couldn't see her face clearly through the chain link, but I could hear everything: the rattle of metal, the sharp crack of something heavy against flesh, and my sister's voice breaking mid-scream. The security camera footage would later show what I couldn't see in that moment. Linda Hutchins, HOA president of Riverside Meadows, standing over my pregnant sister with a length of heavy chain wrapped around her fist, her face twisted into something that didn't look human anymore. I was 3 blocks away when my phone lit up with the ring alert. The thumbnail showed movement at my sister's front door, but the motion had already moved around the side of the house. I pulled over hard enough to leave rubber on the asphalt, my hands shaking as I opened the live feed. "Stay down," Linda was saying, her voice cold and measured. "You people think you can ignore the rules? That you're special?" My sister, 7 months pregnant, visiting me for the week while her husband deployed overseas, was on her knees in the gravel beside her car. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back. Behind Linda stood 2 other women I recognized from HOA meetings, Brenda Kolchek and Janet Morrison, both holding their phones up, recording. "This is what happens when you park in a fire lane," Linda continued, and that's when she raised the chain. I watched my sister try to twist away. I watched the chain come down across her shoulders. I watched her fall forward onto her stomach, onto her belly, and I felt something crack open inside my chest that I hadn't felt since Kandahar, since the night our convoy got hit, and I learned what it meant to see red. My Jeep was already moving before I consciously decided to drive. I worked as a regional security coordinator for a federal courthouse, which meant I knew exactly how many laws Linda Hutchins was breaking in real time, and exactly which agencies would care. My sister's husband, Marcus, worked for Homeland Security investigations, specifically in the human trafficking division. The irony of what Linda was doing, physically restraining and assaulting someone against their will, wasn't lost on me. But in that moment, all I could think about was getting there before she struck again. The feed showed Linda stepping back, breathing hard, while Brenda moved in with another zip tie. They were binding my sister's ankles. I ran 2 red lights. When I pulled onto Cordelia Lane, I could see them in the driveway, Linda standing with her arms crossed, the chain now hanging loose at her side, while my sister lay motionless on the gravel. The other women had backed up toward the mailbox, their phones still raised. A small crowd had gathered on the opposite sidewalk, neighbors watching, no one intervening. I got out of my vehicle without killing the engine. "Step back," I said. My voice came out flat, steady, the tone I used in courtrooms when witnesses started lying. "Right now." Linda turned to face me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, recognition. She knew who I was. We'd been at 3 HOA meetings together since I'd bought my house here 6 months ago. She'd cited me twice for having my trash cans visible from the street after 7 p.m. "Your sister assaulted me," Linda said calmly, gesturing to a small red mark on her forearm. "I'm defending myself and enforcing community standards. She's been parked illegally for 40 minutes. I looked past her to where my sister lay. I could see her chest moving. She was breathing, but her eyes were closed and there was blood on her temple. "Cut those ties off her," I said. "Now." "I've already called the police," Linda replied, "for her assault on me and now for your threatening behavior. I suggest you leave before—" "The police are already on their way," I interrupted, "because I called them 3 minutes ago, and when they get here, they're going to see the footage from 4 different cameras, including the one that shows you hitting a pregnant woman with a chain while she was restrained." Something changed in Linda's expression then. The confidence cracked, just slightly. "That's not... she was..." "Marcus is going to see that footage," I continued, moving slowly toward my sister. "And Marcus works human trafficking cases for HSI. You just tied up a pregnant woman against her will and beat her. How do you think that's going to look?" Behind me, I heard car doors. The cavalry had arrived faster than I expected. But then again, when you tell dispatch that someone is assaulting a pregnant woman and you're watching it happen in real time, they tend to move quick. "Nobody move," a voice called out. Sheriff's deputy, hand on his weapon, eyes scanning the scene. I raised my hand slowly, turned toward him. "I'm the one who called it in. My name's David Torres. I work federal security. That's my sister on the ground. She's pregnant and she's been restrained and beaten." The deputy's eyes went to Linda, then to the chain in her hand, then to my sister on the ground. "Ma'am," he said to Linda, "put that down, now." And that's when Linda made her biggest mistake. She looked straight at the deputy's body camera and said, "This is HOA property. You have no jurisdiction here." The deputy stared at her for a long, dangerous moment. Then he said, "Ma'am, that's not how any of this works. Have you ever watched someone realize they've made a mistake so catastrophic that their entire world is about to cave in? Would you want to know how far someone would go to protect their power, even when the cameras are rolling and the law is standing right there?" Subscribe to hear what happened when Linda Hutchins learned that being HOA president doesn't make you untouchable. Let me back up and tell you how this started. I bought the house on Cordelia Lane in March. It was a small craftsman-style place with a deep front porch and a backyard that sloped down toward the community lake, or what the HOA called a lake. Really, it was a glorified retention pond with a dock and some decorative reeds, but it came with the neighborhood and honestly, it was peaceful. After 8 years working courthouse security in Phoenix, dealing with cartel trials and death threats and metal detectors that went off 40 times a day, I wanted peaceful. The house was perfect for what I needed, close enough to the new federal courthouse that my commute was 20 minutes, far enough from the city that I could sit on my back deck and not hear traffic. My daughter Emma lived with her mother in Scottsdale, but I had her every other weekend, and she loved the lake. She was 8 years old, autistic, and obsessed with dragonflies. The lake had hundreds of them. The HOA stuff seemed minor at first. There was a packet at closing, 47 pages of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I skimmed it the way everyone does, signed where the title company told me to sign, and figured I'd learn as I went. The first violation notice came in April. I left my trash cans at the curb on a Thursday. Trash pickup was Wednesday. The notice, printed on heavy cream cardstock with the Riverside Meadows logo embossed at the top, informed me that receptacles must be returned to a non-visible location within 12 hours of collection. Fine. I moved them. The second notice came in May. My truck, a 2015 Silverado I'd bought used from a sheriff's auction, was parked in my driveway at an angle that extended 3 inches beyond the edge of my property line into the community access easement. The notice included a diagram with measurements. It also included a photo taken from across the street at 6:47 a.m. That one bothered me more, not because of the violation, I'd parked crooked whatever, but because someone had been watching my house at dawn with a measuring tape and a camera. I met Linda Hutchins at the May HOA meeting. The meetings were held in the community center, a low brick building near the entrance gates that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. There were maybe 15 people in the audience, most of them over 60, sitting in folding chairs facing a long table where the board sat. Linda was center seat, wearing a navy blazer and a pearl necklace, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob that looked like it cost more than my mortgage payment. She didn't look cruel. She looked like someone's aunt, someone who brought homemade cookies to church and organized charity drives. But when she spoke, her voice had an edge to it, a precision that felt rehearsed, weaponized. "Item 7, she said, glancing down at her agenda. 1247 Cordelia Lane. Repeat violations regarding refuse receptacle visibility and vehicular encroachment." I raised my hand. "That's me." She looked up, her expression neutral. "Mr. Torres, thank you for attending. The board has reviewed photographic evidence of both violations and determined that a warning is insufficient. We're assessing a fine of $250 per incident. $500 for leaving my trash cans out and parking crooked. For willful disregard of community standards that affect property values and neighborhood aesthetics," Linda corrected. "The covenants are quite clear. All residents agreed to these terms upon purchase." There were murmurs of agreement from some of the older residents. I saw a woman near the back nod approvingly. I could have argued. I could have pointed out that both violations were corrected within hours. But I was new, and I didn't want to be that guy, the one who makes waves and turns into the neighborhood pariah. So I paid the fine and started being more careful. But I also started paying attention. Over the next month, I noticed things. Linda drove through the neighborhood twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, her white Lexus moving slowly down each street like a patrol car. She had a clipboard on her passenger seat. Sometimes she stopped, took photos with her phone, wrote something down. I noticed that certain houses never got violations, the ones with Trump flags mostly, or the ones belonging to the older residents who attended every meeting. But the younger families, the ones with kids or dogs or work trucks in the driveway, They got notices constantly. The family at 1289 Cordelia, the Martinezes, had been cited 4 times in 3 months for playground equipment that was visually obtrusive. Their kid was 6. They had a plastic slide and a swing set. The couple at 1301, the Abbotts, got fined for having a garden gnome that exceeded the 12-inch decorative figure limit by 3 inches. It was petty. It was constant. And it was clearly targeted. I mentioned it once to my neighbor across the street, Bill Kowalski. Bill was in his early 60s, retired Air Force, and he'd lived in Riverside Meadows for 12 years. He was out washing his car when I walked over one Saturday morning in June. "How bad does it get with the HOA?" I asked. Bill stopped scrubbing, glanced toward Linda's house at the end of the block, then lowered his voice. "You learn to keep your head down." "That bad?" "She had a family evicted 2 years ago," he said quietly. "They fought a fine, took it to court, lost. Linda got a lien placed on their house. They couldn't refinance, ended up in foreclosure." "Over what?" "Their kid drew on the driveway with sidewalk chalk. Linda said it was graffiti." Bill went back to scrubbing. "She wins, Torres. She always wins. So you smile, you pay the fines, and you don't make waves." I thought about that conversation a lot over the next few weeks. I thought about it every time I saw Linda's Lexus creeping down my street. I thought about it when I got my 3rd violation notice, this time for having a wreath on my front door that was seasonally inappropriate in July. But I didn't really understand what I was dealing with until my sister came to visit. Rachel was my younger sister by 4 years. She'd been a paralegal in Denver before she married Marcus, and now she was 7 months pregnant with their first child, a girl they were naming Sophia. Marcus was deployed to El Paso for a 6-week training rotation with HSI, and Rachel didn't want to be alone in their apartment. So I invited her to stay with me. She arrived on a Tuesday in late July, driving her Honda CR-V packed with suitcases and pregnancy pillows, and a bag full of baby clothes she'd been organizing. She looked exhausted but happy, her belly round under a loose sundress, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "This place is cute," she said, looking around at the house. "Very you." "Very cheap," I corrected. "But yeah, it works." We spent the afternoon catching up. She told me about Marcus's job, how he'd been working human trafficking cases for the last 2 years, how it was hard but important work. She told me about the pregnancy, about the weird cravings and the back pain, and how scared and excited she was about becoming a mother. I told her about Emma, about how she was doing better with her speech therapy, about how she'd started identifying dragonfly species by their wing patterns. "She's so smart," Rachel said softly. "You're a good dad." "I try." That evening, Rachel parked her CR-V in my driveway next to my truck. It was a tight fit, and the back end of her car extended maybe 6 inches past the property line into the easement. I didn't think anything of it. The next morning, there was a notice on her windshield. Rachel brought it inside, looking confused. "Did you see this?" It was the same cream cardstock, the same embossed logo. But this one was different. Instead of the usual fine amount, it listed the violation as critical and stated that the vehicle had to be moved immediately or it would be towed at owner's expense. "It's barely over the line," Rachel said, "and it's only been here for, 14 hours? Welcome to Riverside Meadows," I muttered. I had her move the car back a few feet, flush against the garage door. Problem solved, or so I thought. That afternoon, I was at work when Rachel called me. Her voice was shaking. "David, there's a woman at the door. She's saying I can't park here at all." "What?" "She's the HOA president, Linda something. She says overnight guest parking is prohibited without a 72-hour advance permit, and since I didn't file for one, my car is illegally parked on private community property." I closed my eyes, felt my jaw tighten. Put her on speaker. I heard rustling, then Linda's voice, crisp and cold. "Mr. Torres, your guest has been informed of the violation. The vehicle needs to be relocated to the visitor lot by the community center. Continued non-compliance will result in towing." "She's my sister," I said. "She's staying with me for a few weeks. She's not a visitor. All non-resident vehicles are classified as visitor parking regardless of relationship. The covenants are clear, Section 12, Paragraph 4. She's 7 months? Pregnant," I said. "She can't walk from the visitor lot. That's 3 blocks. Then I suggest you file for an accommodation request. Those are reviewed at the monthly board meeting, which isn't for another 2 weeks. That's correct. There was a long silence. I'll move the car, Rachel said quietly in the background. No, I said. Leave it where it is. Linda, we'll have a permit request filed by end of day. Until then, the car stays. I heard Linda's breath catch just slightly. She wasn't used to being told no. This will be documented, she said. Then she hung up. Rachel moved the car anyway. She was crying when I got home that evening, sitting on the couch with her hands on her belly. I didn't want to cause problems, she said. I can park down the street. It's fine. It's not fine, I said. None of this is fine. But she wouldn't let me fight it. She was tired, pregnant, worried about Marcus being gone. She didn't want drama. So, I let it go. For 2 days. On Friday, Rachel's car got towed. She'd parked it in the visitor lot like Linda demanded, but apparently the lot had a 48-hour maximum stay. Rachel had been there for 51 hours. The tow truck came at 6 a.m. Rachel didn't even know it was gone until she went out to get something from the trunk and found an empty space. The impound fee was $400. I paid it. I picked up the car, and I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board requesting a full review of Linda Hutchins' conduct. That's when things started to escalate. The following Tuesday, I got a violation notice for unauthorized structural modification. My front porch light had burned out, and I had replaced it with a different fixture. Apparently, that required architectural review board approval, which took 6 to 8 weeks. On Wednesday, Rachel got a letter addressed to occupant informing her that she was trespassing on HOA property and needed to vacate within 72 hours or law enforcement would be contacted. On Thursday, someone spray painted a single word across my garage door. Leave. I filed a police report. The responding officer took photos, asked if I had security cameras. I didn't, not yet, and told me it was probably teenagers. But I knew better. The word was spray painted in the same shade of red that Linda used to mark violations on her clipboard. On Friday, I installed cameras, 4 of them. Front door, driveway, backyard, and 1 pointed at the street. On Saturday, Linda called an emergency HOA meeting. The email went out at 7 a.m. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. that same day at the community center. The subject line read, Urgent Community Safety Concerns. I almost didn't go, but Bill Kowalski knocked on my door at 2:45 p.m. and said, You need to be there. She's coming for you. The community center was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back. I recognized faces from the neighborhood, the Martinezes, the Abbotts, a dozen others who'd been on the receiving end of Linda's enforcement. But there were also people I'd never seen before, older residents who glared at me as I walked in. Linda stood at the front table with the rest of the board. She waited until exactly 3 p.m., then called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice, she began. We've called this meeting to address a serious situation involving threatening behavior, property damage, and harassment directed at board members. My stomach dropped. Over the past week, Linda continued, I have been verbally threatened by a resident of this community. I have been stalked, photographed, and subjected to intimidation tactics designed to interfere with my duties as HOA president. She paused, looked directly at me. I have also received credible information that this resident has been encouraging others to violate community standards and has engaged in vandalism. There were gasps from the audience. That's a lie, I said, standing up. Mr. Torres, Linda said calmly, you'll have an opportunity to speak. Please sit down. I haven't threatened you, I haven't stalked you, and I sure as hell didn't vandalize my own garage. Security footage from the neighborhood entrance gate shows your vehicle leaving and returning at 2:17 a.m. on Thursday morning, Linda said, approximately 40 minutes before the vandalism was discovered. I went to get food. There's a 24-hour diner off Route 40. Can anyone verify that? I stared at her. No one could verify it. I'd eaten alone at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. Linda let the silence stretch. Then she said, The board has reviewed this situation carefully. Given the escalating pattern of threats, non-compliance, and harassment, we are recommending immediate action. Mr. Torres will be fined $5,000 for violations of community conduct standards. Additionally, his guest, She glanced at a paper in front of her. Rachel Torres Mendoza will be permanently banned from all HOA property. The room erupted. "You can't do that," someone shouted. "She's pregnant," another voice called out. But Linda just raised her hand, waited for quiet. "The board's decision is final. Mr. Torres has 30 days to pay the fine, or a lien will be placed on his property. Ms. Torres Mendoza has 48 hours to vacate." Meeting adjourned. She gathered her papers and walked out through a side door, while the room dissolved into chaos. I stood there, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Bill Kowalski appeared at my elbow. "She's setting you up," he said quietly. "This isn't about fines. She's going to force you out." "Over parking violations?" "Over you fighting back." Bill glanced toward the door Linda had exited through. "No one's ever pushed back before. You filed a complaint. You called her out. Now she's going to make an example of you." I looked around the room at the faces watching me, some sympathetic, most afraid. "What do I do?" "You get a lawyer," Bill said, "and you watch your back." I did both. I called an attorney that evening, a woman named Patricia Reeves who specialized in HOA disputes. She listened to everything, took notes, and told me that, yes, Linda was overstepping, but proving it would require documentation, witnesses, and probably months of litigation. "These cases are expensive," she warned, "and HOAs have deep pockets. They'll drag it out, make it painful. Most people just sell and leave." "I'm not selling." "Then get ready for a war." I also upgraded my security system. I added 2 more cameras, set them to save footage to the cloud, enabled motion alerts, and gave access to Rachel and Bill Kowalski. If Linda was going to escalate, I wanted evidence. The next morning, Rachel woke up with contractions. They weren't labor. She was only 32 weeks, but they were Braxton Hicks, painful and frequent enough that she couldn't stand up straight. I made her stay in bed, brought her water and her phone, and called her OB. The nurse told us to monitor them, stay hydrated, and come in if they got worse or closer together. Rachel was terrified. "Marcus isn't here," she kept saying. "What if something happens?" "Nothing's going to happen," I told her. "You're going to stay calm, rest, and let me handle everything else." But I was terrified too, and I was angry, because Rachel wouldn't be this stressed if Linda Hutchins hadn't made her life hell for the last week. I was sitting on the porch that afternoon when I saw Linda's Lexus pull up in front of my house. She got out with her clipboard, walked halfway up my driveway, and took 3 photos of Rachel's car. I walked down to meet her. "Can I help you?" I kept my voice level. "Just documenting violations," Linda said without looking at me. "Your sister's vehicle has been here for 9 days now. That's 6 days beyond the permitted guest duration. She has a medical situation. She's not leaving." "Then you'll be fined accordingly." "Linda," I said, and she finally looked up. "My sister is pregnant and having contractions. She needs rest. You're creating a hostile environment that's putting her health at risk. Back off." Linda smiled. It was thin, cold, and it didn't reach her eyes. "Your sister chose to stay here knowing the rules. That's not my problem. If something happens to her or the baby because of this stress." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Torres?" "I'm telling you to leave her alone." Linda wrote something on her clipboard, then looked at me. "I'll be recommending to the board that we pursue immediate legal action to have you removed from the property. You're a danger to this community." She got back in her car and drove away. I stood there in the driveway, my hands clenched into fists, trying to remember how to breathe. That evening, Bill Kowalski came over with a 6-pack and a warning. "She met with Brenda and Janet this afternoon," he said, sitting on my porch steps. Brenda Kolchek and Janet Morrison were the other 2, board members, Linda's closest allies. "My wife heard them talking at the mailboxes. They're planning something." "Planning what?" Bill shook his head. "I don't know, but Brenda said they needed to document a pattern of dangerous behavior, and Janet said something about making sure there were witnesses." I felt cold. "Witnesses to what?" "I don't know," Bill said again. He looked scared. "But Torres, I've seen her do this before. She manufactures situations. She provokes people until they snap, then she records it and uses it against them." "I'm not going to snap." "Everyone snaps eventually." Bill stood up, crushed his empty beer can. "Just be careful, and maybe get your sister out of here for a few days, just until this cools down." But Rachel refused to leave. She was feeling better. The contractions had stopped, and she didn't want to spend money on a hotel when Marcus was still deployed. Besides, she said, running away would just prove Linda right. So, she stayed. And I stayed vigilant. For 3 days, nothing happened. No violation notices, no Lexus cruising past. The neighborhood felt almost normal. Then, on Thursday morning, I got a text from Bill. Check your cameras. Last night, 2 a.m. I pulled up the footage on my phone. At 1:47 a.m., Linda's white Lexus had parked 2 houses down from mine. At 1:52 a.m., a figure in dark clothing, female, average height, walked up my driveway and placed something on Rachel's windshield. The camera angle didn't catch the face, but when the figure turned to leave, there was a clear shot of the back of her head. Silver bob haircut, navy jacket, Linda. The footage showed her walking back to her car, getting in, and driving away. The timestamp read 1:58 a.m. I went outside and found what she'd left. Another violation notice, this one claiming that Rachel's vehicle was abandoned and scheduled for immediate towing. I forwarded the camera footage to Patricia Reeves with a subject line that read, "Evidence." She called me back within an hour. "This is good. This shows premeditation and harassment. We can use this." "Can we stop her?" "I'll file for an emergency injunction this afternoon. But Torres, you need to understand, she's escalating because you're fighting back. She's going to keep pushing until something breaks." "Then I'll make sure it's not me." But it wasn't me who broke. It was Rachel. On Friday afternoon, she went out to her car to grab her phone charger. I was inside making lunch. I didn't hear the confrontation start. I didn't see Linda's Lexus pull up with Brenda and Janet. I didn't know anything was wrong until my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the driveway camera. I opened the app, and my blood turned to ice. Linda was standing next to Rachel's car. Rachel was between her vehicle and the garage door, one hand on her belly, the other held up defensively. Linda was talking, gesturing sharply, and even without audio, I could see Rachel shaking her head, backing up. Then Brenda appeared in the frame, moving around Rachel's left side. Janet came in from the right. They formed a triangle around her, 3 women in their 50s and 60s, closing in on a pregnant woman in her 30s. I dropped my phone and ran. By the time I got outside, Rachel was pressed back against the garage door. Linda was 2 feet from her face, speaking rapidly. Brenda had her phone out, recording. Janet was taking photos. "Back up," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. All 3 women turned. Linda's expression didn't change. "Your sister assaulted me," she said calmly. "That's bullshit. She struck my arm when I attempted to issue a towing notice. I have witnesses." "You cornered her against a wall. That's false imprisonment." Linda smiled. "I'm on community property enforcing community rules. Your sister became aggressive when I informed her that her vehicle would be towed within the hour. I defended myself." I looked at Rachel. She was crying, trembling, both hands on her belly now. There was a red mark on her forearm, fresh, bright, the kind you get from someone grabbing you hard. "Did you touch her?" I asked Linda. "She's lying," Brenda said quickly. "We saw the whole thing. Rachel pushed Linda first." "Show me the footage." "It's right here," Janet said, holding up her phone. But the screen was angled away from me, and I couldn't see what she was showing. I pulled out my own phone, opened the security app, rewound to 60 seconds earlier. The driveway camera had caught everything. Linda approaching Rachel. Linda stepping into her space. Linda reaching out and grabbing Rachel's arm, jerking her forward. Rachel pulling away. Linda raising her other hand, the one that had been hanging at her side, the one holding something metallic. I zoomed in on the frame. It was a chain, not a heavy chain, but a light one, like you'd use to lock a gate. Linda had it wrapped around her knuckles. She'd been planning this. "You brought a weapon," I said quietly. Linda's expression flickered, just for a second. Then it smoothed back into cold neutrality. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The chain. You had it in your hand when you approached her. You're seeing things." "I have video." "So do I," Linda said. "And mine shows your sister attacking me unprovoked." We stood there in the driveway, me, Linda, Brenda, Janet, and Rachel, still pressed against the garage, and I realized this was the trap. This was what Bill had warned me about. Linda had manufactured a situation where, no matter what I did next, I'd look like the aggressor. If I called the police, she'd show them her edited footage. If I physically removed them from my property, they'd claim assault. If I did nothing, Rachel would be towed and arrested. There was no good move, except there was. Because while Linda had been planning this, I'd been preparing for it. "Torres," a voice called from the street. Bill Kowalski was walking up the driveway, his own phone in hand. "I got it. The whole thing. From my porch." Linda's face went white. Bill held up his phone, screen facing her. "Clear shot of you grabbing her. Clear shot of the chain. Want me to send it to the sheriff's office, or you want to leave now?" For 5 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Linda said, "This isn't over." She turned and walked back to her Lexus. Brenda and Janet followed, both of them avoiding eye contact. I watched them drive away, then turned to Rachel. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "It's okay," I said, holding her up. "You're okay. I've got you." But she wasn't okay. That night, the contractions came back, worse this time, regular, 7 minutes apart. I rushed her to the hospital, called Marcus, and spent 4 hours in the ER while doctors monitored her and gave her medication to stop preterm labor. "She needs to avoid stress," the attending OB told me. "Anything that causes elevated cortisol can trigger contractions. At 32 weeks, we want to keep that baby inside as long as possible." I know. Does she have somewhere calm to stay? Somewhere without whatever triggered this? I thought about my house, about Linda Hutchins 3 doors down, about the violation notices and the cameras and the constant surveillance. "I'll figure it out," I said, but I didn't have to, because the next morning Marcus came home. He'd taken emergency leave the moment I called him, caught a red-eye from El Paso, and walked into the hospital room at 6 a.m. looking exhausted and furious. Rachel cried when she saw him. He held her for a long time, then turned to me. "Tell me everything." So I did. I showed him the violation notices, the footage of Linda grabbing Rachel, the hospital record showing stress-induced contractions. I told him about the meeting, the fines, the manufactured accusations. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Show me the footage of her with the chain again." I pulled it up on my phone. Marcus watched it 3 times, his jaw tight. "She restrained her," he said quietly. "She physically grabbed her, held her against her will, and used a chain as a weapon." "Yeah, that's assault, battery, false imprisonment." Marcus looked at me. "And given that Rachel's pregnant, it might qualify as aggravated assault. Linda says she has footage showing Rachel attacked first." "I don't care what Linda says." Marcus's voice was cold now, the tone I imagined he used when interviewing traffickers. "I'm going to make a call." He stepped out into the hallway. I heard him talking, his voice low and clipped. When he came back 10 minutes later, he said, "Homeland Security Investigations is opening a case." "For what?" "Assault, false imprisonment, witness intimidation, stalking, and they're going to look into the HOA's finances. If Linda's been using her position to extort people, and it sounds like she has, that's racketeering." I stared at him. "You can do that?" "I just did." Rachel was released from the hospital that afternoon with strict orders to rest and avoid stress. Marcus took her to a hotel near the airport, somewhere clean and quiet where Linda Hutchins couldn't find her. Then he went to Riverside Meadows to collect her things. I went with him. We pulled up to my house at 4 p.m. Linda's Lexus was parked at the end of the block, and I could see her watching as we got out. Marcus saw her too. He waved. She drove away. Inside, we packed up Rachel's clothes, her pregnancy pillow, the bag of baby things. Marcus moved with calm efficiency, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The way his hands clenched when he picked up the violation notice still stuck to Rachel's windshield. "I'm going to end this," he said quietly. "Marcus, she hurt my wife. She put my daughter at risk." He looked at me, and his eyes were hard. "I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to make sure Linda Hutchins never does this to anyone again." We loaded everything into his rental car. As we were pulling out of the driveway, Bill Kowalski jogged over. "You leaving?" he asked. "Just Rachel," I said. "I'm staying." "You sure that's smart?" "I'm not letting her win." Bill nodded slowly. "Then you should know. Linda's planning another emergency meeting. Tomorrow. She's going to try to have you evicted." "On what grounds?" "Does it matter?" Bill looked tired. "She'll make something up. She always does." Marcus leaned across me to look at Bill. "Can you get into that meeting?" "Sure, I'm a resident." "Good. Record everything? I'll need it." The meeting was at 10 a.m. on Sunday. I didn't attend. Patricia Reeves advised me not to, said it would look like I was trying to intimidate the board. Instead, I sat in my house and waited while Bill went in with his phone recording in his jacket pocket. He called me at 11:30 a.m. "You need to hear this," he said. He played me the audio. Linda's voice, crisp and confident. "Mr. Torres represents a clear and present danger to this community. He has threatened board members, violated multiple covenants, and brought an unstable guest onto the property who attacked me without provocation. I'm recommending that we invoke emergency removal provisions under Section 19 of the Master Covenant." Another voice, Brenda. "What does that mean exactly?" Linda. "It means we file for immediate eviction. He has 7 days to vacate the property, or we get a court order for forcible removal." Janet. "Can we really do that?" Linda. "We can do anything we need to do to protect the community. That's our legal obligation." Silence, then someone else. A male voice I didn't recognize. "What about due process? Doesn't he get a hearing?" Linda. "This is his hearing. He was invited to attend. He chose not to." More silence. Then a vote. 8 in favor, 3 opposed. The motion passed. I had 7 days. I called Patricia Reeves immediately. She listened to the recording, swore softly, and said, "That's not legal. Section 19 requires a formal hearing with advance notice and the right to present evidence. They can't just vote to evict you in secret. So what do? You file an emergency counterclaim, and you pray the judge sees this before they get their court order." That afternoon, I got served. A process server showed up at my door with papers stating that the Riverside Meadows HOA had filed for emergency eviction based on imminent threat to community safety. I had 72 hours to vacate, or the sheriff would remove me by force. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch with every light in the house on, watching Linda's house down the street, wondering how far she was willing to go. I got my answer at 2 a.m. when my driveway camera caught movement. 2 figures, both in dark clothing, approaching Rachel's car. The one in front had something in her hand, a Slim Jim, the tool you use to unlock car doors. They were trying to get inside. I grabbed my phone, called 911, and ran outside. "Stop!" I shouted. "Police are on the way." Both figures froze. In the porch light, I could see their faces now, Brenda Kolchek and Janet Morrison. "We're enforcing a tow order," Brenda said, her voice shaking. "At 2 a.m., without a tow truck, the vehicle is illegally parked. You're trying to steal it. That's grand theft auto." Janet's phone was up, recording me. "He's threatening us. You're hearing this, right? He's threatening us." I heard sirens in the distance getting closer. Both women looked at each other, then ran. They made it to Brenda's car parked down the street and peeled out just as the sheriff's deputy pulled up. I showed him the camera footage. He watched it twice, shook his head, and said, "That's attempted vehicle theft. Do you want to press charges?" "Yes." He took my statement, collected the footage, and told me a detective would follow up. As he was leaving, he said, "I don't know what's going on with your HOA, but you might want to get out of here before this gets worse." "It's already worse," I said. But I didn't know how much worse it could get. The next morning, Monday, I woke up to find my front yard destroyed. Someone had spray-painted child predator across my garage door in huge red letters. My mailbox was smashed. All 4 tires on my truck were slashed. I filed another police report, but by then, the damage was done. Neighbors walked past my house staring. Someone took photos. By noon, there was a post on the community Facebook page claiming that I was under investigation for inappropriate conduct with minors, and that the HOA was taking steps to protect our children. It was a lie, all of it. But lies spread faster than truth, especially when they're designed to trigger fear. Patricia Reeves called me that afternoon. The judge denied their eviction petition, said it was procedurally defective and lacked evidentiary support. That's good, right? Yes. But Torres, you need to understand, this is going to get uglier. Linda's losing control of the situation, which means she's going to escalate. People like her don't de-escalate. They double down. What do you think she'll do? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think she's going to try to provoke you into doing something that gives her legal justification. She's going to push until you snap." "I'm not going to snap." "Everyone snaps eventually." I'd heard that before. From Bill. But I didn't believe it then, and I didn't believe it now. I'd spent 8 years in federal security dealing with people who wanted to hurt judges, juries, witnesses. I knew how to stay calm under pressure. But Linda Hutchins wasn't just applying pressure. She was targeting my family. On Tuesday, Emma came to visit. It was my weekend with her, and despite everything happening, I wasn't going to cancel. She needed routine, needed stability. So, her mother dropped her off at 5 p.m., and Emma ran up the porch steps with her backpack full of sketchbooks and dragonfly field guides. "Dad, can we go to the lake?" "Maybe tomorrow, sweetie. But the dragonflies are active at sunset. That's when they hunt." I looked at her face, so hopeful, so excited, and I couldn't say no. So, we walked down to the lake, Emma chattering about Odonata classification, while I kept one eye on the path behind us. The lake was empty. We sat on the dock, Emma with her binoculars scanning the reeds, me watching the shadows. For 20 minutes, it was peaceful. Emma identified 4 species. She drew them in her notebook with careful, precise lines. Then I saw Linda. She was standing at the edge of the trees, maybe 50 yards away, her phone raised, taking photos. "Emma," I said quietly, "time to go." "But Dad!" "Now." I took her hand and we walked back up the path. Linda followed us at a distance, still filming. I didn't confront her. I just got Emma inside the house and locked the door. That night, a post appeared on the community Facebook page, photos of me and Emma at the lake. The caption read, "Concerning behavior by problem resident. Multiple people have reported him spending excessive time at the lake with young girls. HOA is monitoring the situation." The comments were immediate and vicious. "Call the police. Keep your kids away from him." I knew something was off about that guy. I reported the post. Facebook took it down after 6 hours. But by then, screenshots were circulating. People I'd never met were talking about me like I was a predator. Emma's mother called me at 11 p.m., furious and scared. "What the hell is going on? Someone sent me a screenshot saying you're under investigation." "It's not true. It's the HOA president. She's making things up." "Making things up? David, this says you were photographed with underage girls." That was Emma, at the lake. The woman took photos out of context and posted them to scare people. This is insane. I know. I don't want Emma there if this is happening. "Mom," I heard Emma's voice in the background. "I want to stay with Dad." There was muffled conversation, then Emma's mother came back on. "She can stay tonight, but if anything else happens, anything, I'm coming to get her." Understood. I didn't sleep. I sat in Emma's doorway watching her sleep, making sure nothing and no one came through that door. The next morning, Wednesday, I made Emma pancakes and tried to act like everything was normal. She was too smart for that. She'd seen the spray-painted garage door, the slashed tires. She'd heard me on the phone with lawyers. "Dad, are we in trouble?" "No, sweetie." "Then why is everyone being mean to you?" "Because sometimes adults act like bullies. But it's going to be okay." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not going to let them win." Emma looked at me with those serious brown eyes she'd inherited from her mother. "You promise?" "I promise." At 10 a.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed. 2 sheriff's deputies standing on the porch. I told Emma to stay inside, then went to answer. "David Torres?" "That's me." "We have a wellness check request. There's been a complaint about a child welfare situation at this address." My stomach dropped. "From who?" "Anonymous call. Can we come in and verify that any minors in the home are safe?" I wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell them to get a warrant. But I also knew that refusing would make things worse, make it look like I had something to hide. "My daughter's inside. She's fine. You can come in." They spent 10 minutes walking through the house, talking to Emma, checking that she had food, clean clothes, a safe place to sleep. Emma answered their questions politely, confused but cooperative. When they were satisfied, they apologized for the intrusion and left. But I knew what had happened. Linda had called in a false report to get law enforcement involved, to create documentation, to make it look like I was a threat. Marcus called me at noon. "I heard about the wellness check." "Word travels fast." "It's a small jurisdiction. I have contacts." He paused. "Torres, how close are you to breaking?" "I'm fine." "No, you're not. And Linda knows it. She's pushing every button she can find because she wants you to snap. She wants you to do something that justifies everything she's been saying. So, what do? You let me handle it. HSI's investigation is moving forward. We're pulling HOA financial records, interviewing other residents, documenting the pattern of abuse. It's going to take time, but we're building a case. How much time? Couple weeks maybe a month. Marcus, I don't have a month. She's escalating every day. Today it was a false CPS report. Tomorrow it'll be something worse. Then you get Emma out of there. You go stay somewhere else until this is over. I'm not leaving. David, I'm not leaving. This is my home. If I run, she wins. Every other family in this neighborhood who's scared of her will see that, and they'll never fight back. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Okay, but if things get dangerous, if she threatens you or Emma physically, you call me immediately. Not the local police, me. Why not the local police? Because I don't trust them not to side with her. Small town cops, HOA president with connections. You're the outsider. She's establishment. They'll protect her." That thought stayed with me the rest of the day. The idea that I couldn't even trust law enforcement to be neutral. That evening, Bill Kowalski came over after Emma was asleep. "I need to tell you something," he said. He looked scared. "Linda's planning something for tomorrow." "Planning what?" "I don't know exactly, but I heard her talking to Brenda and Janet outside the community center today. She said, 'We'll make sure he's home, we'll make sure there are witnesses, and we'll make sure the cameras are rolling.' Then she said something about Rachel. My blood went cold. Rachel's not here. She's at a hotel with Marcus." "I know, but Linda doesn't know that. She thinks Rachel's still staying with you." "What's she planning to do?" "I think—" Bill hesitated. "I think she's going to stage something. Make it look like you or Rachel did something violent. Then she'll have video evidence, witnesses, and a reason to call the police." "That's insane. She's insane. You've seen what she's capable of." I sat down heavily on the porch steps. "So what do? Sit here and wait for her to frame me? You could leave, just for a few days. And let her break into my house, plant evidence, do whatever she's planning without me here to stop it?" Bill didn't have an answer for that. That night, I called Marcus and told him everything. He listened, asked questions, and then said, "Bring Emma to the hotel, tonight. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. Get her out of there. She has school tomorrow. David, get your daughter out of that house." I knew he was right, but waking Emma up, packing her things, driving her to a hotel in the middle of the night, it felt like admitting defeat. It felt like Linda had won. Still, I did it. Because Emma's safety was more important than my pride. She was groggy and confused when I woke her at midnight. "Dad, what's happening?" "We're going on an adventure. You're going to stay with Uncle Marcus and Aunt Rachel for a couple days." "Like a sleepover?" "Exactly like that." I packed her bag, loaded her into the truck, on the spare tire I'd mounted after the slashing, and drove to the hotel. Marcus met me in the parking lot. "You did the right thing," he said. "Then why does it feel like I'm running?" "Because you're smart enough to know the difference between running and protecting your kid." I hugged Emma goodnight, promised I'd see her soon, and drove back to Riverside Meadows alone. My house felt empty. Wrong. I checked all the cameras, made sure every door was locked, and tried to sleep. At 7 a.m. Thursday morning, I was woken by the sound of vehicles outside. I looked through the front window and saw 3 cars parked in. Front of my house, Linda's Lexus, Brenda's sedan, and a white panel van I didn't recognize. 7 people were standing in my driveway. Linda, Brenda, Janet, and 4 others I didn't know. 3 men and 1 woman, all wearing matching blue polo shirts with Aramido's Compliance embroidered on the chest. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera app, and started recording before I opened the door. "Can I help you?" I stayed on the porch, didn't step down. "Mr. Torres," Linda said. She was holding her clipboard, pen poised. "The board has authorized an emergency safety inspection of your property. These are licensed contractors hired by the HOA to assess structural and environmental hazards. You don't have permission to enter my property. Under Section 22 of the covenants, the HOA has the right to conduct inspections when there's reasonable suspicion of code violations or safety hazards." What reasonable suspicion? Multiple complaints from neighbors about strange odors, possible gas leaks, and concerning activity. Linda looked at the men in blue polo shirts. These contractors need access to your home to verify there are no immediate threats to the community. No. If you refuse entry, we'll obtain a court order. Then obtain a court order. Until then, get off my property. Linda smiled. We're not on your property. We're in the driveway, which is classified as a common area easement. The driveway is mine. Actually, according to the site plan filed with the county, the first 10 feet of every driveway in this community is maintained by the HOA for utility access. That makes it common area. Linda gestured to the contractors. You're free to watch from the porch while they conduct their inspection. The contractors moved toward my garage. I stepped down off the porch. Stop! Mr. Torres, Linda said warningly. Don't do anything you'll regret. One of the contractors, a heavy-set man with a beard, pulled out a tool that looked like a pry bar. He positioned it at the edge of the garage door. I said stop. I moved between him and the door. You're interfering with an official HOA inspection, Linda said. That's a violation of Section 22. Call the police. Let them sort it out. We already did. They're on their way. And she was right. Less than a minute later, a sheriff's patrol car pulled up. Deputy Martinez, the same officer who'd responded to the attempted break-in, got out and walked toward us. What's going on? Linda spoke first. Deputy, we're attempting to conduct a court-authorized safety inspection, and Mr. Torres is physically blocking us. Do you have a court order? The deputy asked. Linda hesitated. It's being processed. But under the HOA covenants, without a court order, he doesn't have to let you in. Deputy Martinez looked at me. Mr. Torres, do you want these people on your property? No. Then they need to leave. Linda's face flushed. Deputy, we have legitimate safety concerns. File for a court order, ma'am. Until then, this is private property. The contractors backed off. Linda stood there for a moment, her jaw tight, then said, Fine, we'll be back with the proper paperwork. They left. Deputy Martinez watched them drive away, then turned to me. You're making enemies. I didn't start this. Doesn't matter. In small towns, the person with the most friends wins. He glanced at my garage door, at the faded spray paint I'd tried to scrub off. Whatever's happening here, it's escalating. You might want to consider cutting your losses. I'm not leaving. Your funeral. He got back in his patrol car and drove away. I stood in my driveway for a long time after everyone left, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Bill was right. Marcus was right. Linda was escalating, and she wasn't going to stop until she'd forced me out or destroyed me completely. But I also knew something she didn't. I knew that Marcus's HSI investigation was closing in. I knew that they'd subpoenaed HOA financial records and found irregularities, thousands of dollars in unexplained transfers, inflated contractor invoices, possible embezzlement. I knew they were interviewing former residents who'd been driven out, collecting testimony, building a pattern. I just had to survive long enough for that investigation to come to fruition. That afternoon, Patricia Reeves called. I have news, good and bad. Give me the good first. The judge granted our restraining order petition. Linda Hutchins is prohibited from coming within 100 feet of you, your property, or your family members. Violation carries criminal penalties. And the bad? She's suing you for defamation, harassment, and emotional distress. $1 million in damages. I sat down. On what grounds? She claims you've been spreading false information about her, damaging her reputation, and causing her severe psychological harm. Patricia paused. It's a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to bury you in legal fees and make you give up. How do we fight it? We file an anti-SLAPP motion to dismiss. But Torres, even if we win, it's going to take months and cost tens of thousands of dollars. She's counting on you not being able to afford it. Then she's counting wrong. That evening, I sat on my porch and thought about everything that had happened. The violation notices, the harassment, the false accusations, the attempt to separate me from my daughter. And I thought about all the other families in Riverside Meadows who'd gone through the same thing, the ones who'd given up and left rather than fight. I was done being reactive. It was time to go on offense. I called Bill Kowalski. How many families in this neighborhood have been harassed by Linda? Including you, maybe a dozen in the last 3 years. Do you have their contact information? Some of them. Why? Because I'm organizing a recall election, and I'm going to remove Linda Hutchins from the board." Bill was silent for a moment. Then he said, "That's bold. You have a better idea?" "No, but Torres, you know she's not going to let this happen quietly." "I know." The next 3 days were chaos. I contacted every former resident I could find, every current neighbor who'd been fined or harassed. I collected stories, documentation, photographs. I found out that Linda had driven out at least 8 families in the last 3 years, always using the same tactics: escalating violations, manufactured emergencies, false accusations. I found out that she'd embezzled nearly $100,000 from HOA funds by approving fake invoices from a contractor who didn't exist, a contractor whose business address was Linda's brother's house in Nevada. I found out that she'd had a restraining order filed against her in California before she moved here, issued by a previous HOA she'd terrorized. And I compiled all of it into a 50-page document that I filed with the county and distributed to every household in Riverside Meadows. The response was immediate. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before knocked on my door to thank me, parents whose kids had been targeted by Linda's harassment, elderly residents who'd been fined for minor violations they couldn't afford, people who'd been too scared to speak up individually but were willing to stand together. Within 48 hours, we had enough signatures to trigger a recall election. Linda's response was to call another emergency meeting. It was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I went, flanked by Bill Kowalski and 6 other residents who would sign the recall petition. The community center was packed, standing room only, people spilling out into the parking lot. Linda sat at the board table looking calm, composed, in control, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her pen too tightly. "This meeting is to address false and defamatory allegations made by Mr. Torres," she began. "Allegations that are not only untrue, but constitute harassment and—" "Point of order," said a voice from the audience. It was Tom Martinez, father of 3, one of the families Linda had targeted. "We're not here to listen to you defend yourself. We're here to vote on your removal." "This meeting wasn't called for that purpose." "Then I'm calling it now. I move for an immediate vote on the recall of Linda Hutchins as HOA president." "You can't." "I second," called another voice. The room erupted, people shouting in support, a few voices, mostly board allies, trying to shut it down. But the momentum was unstoppable. Within 5 minutes, we had a formal motion on the floor. Linda stood up. "This is irregular. This violates procedural—" "You want to talk about violations?" Tom Martinez was standing now, his voice shaking with anger. "You violated your fiduciary duty. You violated the trust of this community. You violated basic human decency. I demand you sit down." "No, I'm done. Sitting down. I'm done being quiet. We all are." The vote was called. 83 residents voted to recall Linda Hutchins. 12 voted against. 4 abstained. Linda sat frozen at the table, her face pale, as the results were read. Then, without a word, she gathered her papers and walked out. I watched her go, and I felt something release in my chest. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just exhaustion. But it wasn't over yet. That night, Marcus called. "HSI is moving tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. We're executing search warrants on Linda's home, her bank accounts, and the HOA office. We have enough for charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. And the assault on Rachel? That too, plus false imprisonment, criminal harassment, and filing a false report. She's looking at minimum 5 years, probably more." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Marcus, she's going to run. We have people watching her house. She's too smart to run from her house. She'll disappear some other way. Then we'll find her." But I wasn't convinced. I'd seen Linda's face when the recall vote was read. She'd looked defeated, yes, but she'd also looked calculating, like she was already planning her next move. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch with the lights off, watching Linda's house through the darkness. Her Lexus was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. Everything looked normal. At 3 a.m., the lights went off. At 3:15, Linda's garage door opened. I grabbed my phone, called Marcus. "She's moving. Stay where you are. Don't engage." "She's getting away?" "David, stay where you are. That's an order." I watched Linda's Lexus back out of her driveway. She drove slowly past my house. her headlights sweeping across my porch. For a second, I thought she saw me sitting there in the darkness. Then she was gone. I called Marcus back. She's heading east on Riverside Drive, white Lexus, license plate. By the time I finished giving him the information, I could hear sirens in the background. Marcus said, "We've got units moving to intercept. Just stay put." I stayed. I waited. And at 4:30 a.m., Marcus called back. "We got her. She made it about 15 miles before we pulled her over. Had a suitcase full of cash in the trunk and a fake ID with a flight booked to Mexico for 7 a.m. "Jesus." "Yeah." Marcus sounded tired. "She's in custody now. HSI's taking lead on the case. This is going to be big, Torres. National news big. HOA president embezzles funds, assaults pregnant woman, attempts to flee the country. It's got everything." "What about the other board members?" "Brenda and Janet are being interviewed now. They might face charges as accomplices depending on what they knew." I sat on my porch as the sky started to lighten, watching the neighborhood wake up, porch lights turning on, people checking their lawns, their mailboxes, starting their Saturday morning routines. None of them knew yet that Linda Hutchins was in federal custody. None of them knew that the reign of terror was over, but they would. Soon. The story broke on Monday morning, front page of the local paper, HOA president arrested on federal charges. By afternoon, it was picked up by state news. By evening, it was national. The details were damning. HSI had traced $127,000 in embezzled funds. They'd documented a pattern of harassment spanning 3 years and affecting at least 15 families. They'd uncovered Linda's prior restraining order from California and her history of similar behavior at a previous HOA, and they had the footage. The video of Linda grabbing Rachel, wrapping the chain around her hand, striking her while she was restrained. That footage went viral. Within 48 hours, Linda Hutchins became the most hated woman in America, the face of HOA tyranny, of unchecked power, of what happens when someone is given authority with no accountability. The news crews showed up at Riverside Meadows. They interviewed me, Bill, Tom Martinez, the families who'd been driven out. They filmed the community center where Linda had held her meetings, the driveway where she'd assaulted Rachel. And through it all, I just felt tired. The preliminary hearing was held 3 weeks later. Rachel, now 35 weeks pregnant and on modified bed rest, testified via video link from her home. She described the assault, the pain, the terror. She showed the judge the medical records documenting her stress-induced contractions. Linda sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her silver hair dull under the courtroom lights. She didn't look at Rachel. She didn't look at anyone. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Gaines, reviewed the evidence in silence. Then she said, "Ms. Hutchins, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen domestic abusers, stalkers, violent offenders. But I have rarely seen someone use a position of authority to terrorize an entire community the way you have." Linda stared straight ahead. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming. Video footage shows you physically assaulting a pregnant woman who was restrained and defenseless. Financial records show systematic embezzlement of funds entrusted to you. Witness testimony documents a pattern of harassment, intimidation, and abuse of power stretching back years." Judge Gaines set the preliminary hearing papers aside. "I'm binding you over for trial on all charges. I'm also denying bail. You've demonstrated a willingness to flee, and I believe you pose a continued threat to the community." Linda's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client is a 62-year-old woman with no prior criminal record." "Your client assaulted a pregnant woman with a weapon," Judge Gaines interrupted. "Your client embezzled over $100,000. Your client attempted to flee the country. Bail is denied." The courtroom was silent as they led Linda away. Outside, Rachel held Marcus's hand and cried, not from sadness, from relief. "It's over," she said. "It's over," Marcus agreed. But for me, it wasn't quite over yet. The new HOA board, elected in an emergency election 2 weeks after Linda's arrest, asked me to attend their first official meeting. I almost didn't go. I was done with HOA meetings, done with community politics, done with all of it. But Bill Kowalski convinced me. "You started this," he said. "You should be there to see how it ends." So I went. The new president was Tom Martinez. The new board included Bill, 2 other longtime residents, and a young lawyer who'd volunteered to help sort through the financial mess Linda had left behind. Tom called the meeting to order. First item, formal apology to David Torres and his family for the harassment they endured under the previous board's leadership. There was applause, actual applause. Tom continued. Second item, dissolution of all fines issued during Linda Hutchins' tenure as president. We've reviewed the records, and 90% of those fines were either excessive, improperly documented, or completely fabricated. More applause. Third item, new bylaws to prevent this from ever happening again. We're implementing term limits, financial audits, and a resident grievance process that doesn't run through the president. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. It was boring, procedural, exactly what an HOA meeting should be. Afterward, Tom pulled me aside. I know you're probably thinking about selling and getting out of here. The thought crossed my mind. I don't blame you, but Torres, what you did, standing up to her when everyone else was too scared, that changed everything. People aren't afraid anymore. You gave them that. I didn't know what to say to that. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. Think about staying. We could use someone like you on the board. I'll think about it. But I already knew my answer. 3 months later, Rachel gave birth to Sophia at 38 weeks, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy and perfect. Marcus sent me a photo from the hospital. Rachel holding her daughter, both of them smiling, both of them safe. Linda's trial was scheduled for January. Her attorney was trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested. The evidence was too strong, the crimes too egregious. Linda was going to prison. Emma came over one Saturday in late November. We walked down to the lake like we used to, before everything fell apart. She brought her binoculars and her field guide. "Dad, look," she said, pointing at the reeds. "Common whitetail, male." I watched the dragonfly hover over the water, its wings catching the afternoon light. "It's beautiful," I said. "They're predators," Emma said matter-of-factly. "They eat other insects, but they're also important for the ecosystem. They keep mosquito populations under control. So they're helpful predators." "Exactly." Emma looked up at me. "Are you a helpful predator, Dad?" I smiled. "Where did that come from?" "Uncle Marcus said you protected Aunt Rachel and baby Sophia, and you protected all the families in the neighborhood. That sounds like being a helpful predator." I guess I never thought about it that way. We sat on the dock as the sun started to set, watching the dragonflies hunt. The lake was peaceful, the neighborhood was quiet, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Later that evening, after I'd taken Emma back to her mother's, I sat on my porch and watched the stars come out. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter somehow. The fear that had permeated everything for so long was gone. Linda Hutchins had tried to build an empire of control. She'd used rules and regulations as weapons, wielding them to crush anyone who challenged her authority. But in the end, her need for power had consumed her, and the community she'd tried to dominate had survived without her. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Trial date set. January 15th. Rachel's planning to testify in person. "You in?" I typed back. "Wouldn't miss it." I thought about all the families Linda had hurt, the ones who'd been driven from their homes, the ones who'd paid thousands in unjust fines, the ones who'd lived in fear of her petty tyranny. Justice was slow, but it was coming, and in a weird way, I realized I was grateful for everything that had happened. Not because it was easy, it had been hell, but because it had shown me something important about communities, about fear, about the courage it takes to stand up when everyone else sits down. The night was cool, quiet. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car drove past, headlights sweeping across the lawns. Normal sounds, safe sounds. I thought about Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. I thought about Emma, drawing dragonflies in her notebook. I thought about all the families in Riverside Meadows who could finally live without fear. And I thought about what Tom Martinez had said. You gave them that. Maybe I did. Or maybe they gave it to themselves by finally deciding they'd had enough. Either way, we'd won. Not because we'd destroyed Linda Hutchins, though her own actions had certainly done that. We'd won because we'd refused to let her break us. I sat on that porch until the stars were fully out, until the neighborhood was dark and still. And I thought about what comes next, because there's always a next, always another challenge, another fight. Another moment when you have to decide whether to stand up or sit down. But tonight, I could rest. Tonight, the fight was over, and we'd survived. If you've ever felt powerless against someone abusing their authority, if you've ever wondered whether standing up makes a difference, I hope this story showed you that it does. It's not easy, it's not quick, but eventually, truth wins. Subscribe to hear more stories of people who refused to back down, who fought for what was right, and who proved that even the smallest act of courage can change everything.